Panoptica, Cisco's cloud application security solution, provides end-to-end lifecycle protection for cloud-native application environments. It empowers organizations to safeguard their APIs, serverless functions, containers, and Kubernetes environments. Panoptica ensures comprehensive cloud security, compliance, and monitoring at scale, offering deep visibility, contextual risk assessments, and actionable remediation insights for all your cloud assets. Powered by graph-based technology, Panoptica's attack path engine prioritizes and offers dynamic remediation for vulnerable attack vectors, helping security teams quickly identify and remediate potential risks across cloud infrastructures. Panoptica utilizes advanced attack path analysis, root cause analysis, and dynamic remediation techniques to reveal potential risks from an attacker's point of view. Visit panoptica.app to learn more today. That's panoptica.app.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. July is upon us. We are now kind of into the first week of July 2024, I guess second week of July, if you will. Hope everybody's doing well. It is second half of the year. It is extremely hot in all sorts of places here in the United States, especially here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I think we hit a record high. I think we were around 105 in terms of the actual temperature, and I think we got to felt like 120. So, for those of you that are in lesser environments for heat, please enjoy that. Aaron and I are sweating out here in Raleigh, North Carolina. But anyways, hopefully everybody's doing well. And we just finished up the Independence Day weekend here in the United States, or like we like to call, to our friend Christian Riley, who is president of the private cloud, really the first guest we've ever had on the show and a good friend of the show. We like to call it, happy second place day to him. But it really got me thinking a lot about freedoms. One of the things here in the United States that we talk quite a bit about is freedoms and the freedoms that sort of come with the type of government that we run. And I don't want to make this a show about government or politics or any of those things, but I know that a lot of countries around the world are going through elections this year. It's election year in many places, and it's something that, depending on elections and trends that happen throughout the world, freedom is always something that, is on the ballot. It's something that is always being discussed, whether it is expanding freedoms, whether it is taking freedoms away from people, whether it is, freedoms of, how you live your life, how you go about doing things. And I got to thinking about freedoms this whole weekend quite a bit. We're obviously going through some things in the United States in terms of the election that we have coming up and what the ramifications of those things might be. But I kind of wanted to talk today a little bit about freedoms of technology, freedoms that we experience in the technology industry. Sometimes we're extremely grateful for, and sometimes I think we take for granted. And, some of the things that are coming up and going on in the industry right now are going to potentially have some impacts on what freedoms look like from a technology perspective. So I thought what I would do is, in the vein of kind of thinking about freedom, is really kind of dig into that after the break. Welcome back to the Cloudcast. I'm your host, Brian Gracely. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, I want to dive into a little bit of looking at freedoms as we think about this past weekend here, the 4th of July holiday here in the United States, and something that we, think about in terms of freedoms here in the United States. But those are more sort of human rights freedoms and government provided freedoms. And I wanted to sort of just use that as a theme to think a little bit about some of the freedoms that we are provided from a technology community industry perspective, as well as some of the things that we think about in terms of freedom, and where some of those things might be going in the future. So if we think a little bit about it, technology provides us with a lot of freedoms, right? The freedom of, job that we want to take. Do we want to be, a software developer? Do we want to work in operations? Do we want to work in marketing? Do we want to start our own company? Do we want to work for a large company? So a lot of freedom in terms of the types of job that you can aspire to, the type of job that you can work to build your skills to be, capable of doing. We're given, in some instances, the freedom of location where we work. And obviously, when the COVID pandemic hit, there was lots of movement, not only in terms of work from home, but we saw many people that, moved to different parts of the world, parts of their country, parts of the state they live in, whatever that might have been. So, technology affords us the ability to work where it makes sense for us, whether that is in an office space, whether that is with your colleagues, whether it's in a coffee shop, wherever that might be. We have a certain amount of freedom of where we work as well. And then we have the freedom typically of, the type of people that we want to work with in terms of, do we want to work for a large corporation, a small corporation? Do we want to start our own thing? Do we want to, who do we want to work with? What are the types of people you want to work with? Where do you want to work? So it provides a lot of choices from that perspective in terms of, how you interact with technology if it's part of your day job. The second thing we often think of is sort of freedom of choice, freedom of technology choice, right? You can oftentimes choose the technologies that are going to best fit what you need the technologies to do. So whether that is, highly complex technologies, very simple technologies, portable technologies, technologies that are, free to obtain. So things like open source software, things that have variable costs, things that have, simple interfaces, complex interfaces, all those types of things. There's quite a bit of freedom of technology choices that are out there. Obviously, we've talked about things like the Cloud Native Computing Foundation landscape, hundreds of open source projects, but there are literally, in any domain that you are interested in working on, needing technology, there are probably dozens and dozens of options that are out there available to you, whether it's a database, networking, whether it's SaaS service that you want to use, how you want to store your data, all those types of things. There are dozens and dozens of choices out there. And so, things like technology standards provide us a level of freedom in terms of, understanding what's capable of what we're doing, but also giving you the freedom to say, well, there's a standard out there. And as long as I sort of comply and work with that standard, whether it's an API, an interface, a protocol standard, there's a lot of technology choices that are out there. And the third thing is, we have a certain amount of freedom to choose when to use technology versus use our own sort of, innate human skills, right? So, yes, you can use a spreadsheet, you can use a calculator, you can use a pencil and pen if you want to, you can do things in your head. You have the flexibility to determine when technology is, going to be the best choice for what you're trying to do versus, not using technology or using various grades or levels of technology to sort of solve the problem that you want. So there is a lot of freedom that technology affords us in terms of, how we interact with it, how much of it is imposed on our lives, how much we want to use it to solve problems that we have, and to a certain extent, what we're willing or able to pay for that technology in order to help us, improve the situation that we're trying to deal with, right? So lots of freedoms and options and opportunities that are there. But when we think about freedoms, they don't always come without a price, right? So to a certain extent, when we think about human rights or human liberties types of freedoms, oftentimes those are provided to a certain extent at sort of no cost, if you will, right? So no sort of financial cost. Oftentimes, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, those types of freedoms, freedom of speech, freedom to congregate with other people, freedom to not be arrested falsely. Those types of freedoms are to a certain extent provided at no cost, and people could argue, well, there is cost and so forth in terms of being a citizen and being a good citizen, not committing a crime, all those types of things. On the technology side, there are freedoms, and we talked about things like standards. We talked about kind of the variety of choices that we have, but those types of choices don't necessarily come for free, right? We may choose to use a technology today. We may choose to work with a vendor and their technology today, but that doesn't ensure that technology or that vendor or that company that you are working with as a systems integrator is going to be around forever. So, we see all the time that companies get acquired. That doesn't necessarily mean that the technology that was acquired is going to be continued to use. We see technologies that go away or get discontinued all the time. We see, technologies stop being supported, right? We see, open source projects go away. We see companies discontinue or end of life technologies. So the freedom that you have in terms of what you choose, who you choose to work with, how you choose to deploy it, doesn't necessarily mean that freedom will last forever, right? And those are types of things that people oftentimes have to think about longer term in terms of not only does this solve a problem for me today, but what will this mean for me, in the future, right? Will I have ongoing maintenance costs that I have to have with this? Are there skill sets that will just sort of inherently be available to us to use this technology, or Is that going to become a burden on me in the future? So this is where you see people kind of get into discussions of is this open enough? Does it give me lock-in? Does it give me flexibility? Is that flexibility worth paying for now as sort of an insurance policy? Or am I going to have to ramp up and learn this technology? Are there going to be people available to me to help if we have problems with this? So all those things are sort of there. The other thing is, in some cases, the freedom to choose your technology may be not taken away from you, but made more difficult through things like technologies becoming more expensive over time. Right, we're seeing, the thing that's in the news right now, for example, is the VMware licensing that Broadcom is changing. That might make it prohibitive to sort of continue to execute on the strategy or the sort of the freedom that you chose in terms of certain technologies. Because the marketplace has changed, the dynamics of things have changed. So your freedom to be able to continue to do things the way that you did them before, or the price point or the skill set you need, may not necessarily be there in the exact same context that it was before. So those types of things can change, and so they don't necessarily always come without a price. Now, another thing that we see quite a bit is laws will change. Right, we see situations in which countries or like the European Union, for example, or laws within China or different parts of Asia, laws that change in the United States because one government party or political party comes into power, changes the rules that the last political party had in place or they put in place. So those things will change from time to time, and so the laws oftentimes can impact the choices that have to be made, the freedoms that you have to choose certain things, but maybe more so the freedom that you have in terms of the flexibility of what you have to do. You may have to go through more hoops. You may have to get a certain certification. You may only be able to use certain types of technologies in certain contexts, right? We see that quite a bit in military context or defense or things along those lines as well. So the freedoms don't always necessarily come forever. They're not guaranteed forever. And they're not necessarily always going to be in the exact same context. And then finally, the thing that we talk about all the time in terms of just purely the internet, the freedom to choose in the internet, there are many, many, many choices. In many cases, people, love the services that are available on the internet, whether it's a SaaS service or something like Twitter or Gmail or something that feels like, there's no inherent cost to it. But, in exchange for you not paying for it, you are inherently exchanging it for your data or your freedom of, freedom of movement because your information is being exchanged, through your mobile phone or whatever it might be. So, I mention all these things not to make any sort of political statement, but to sort of remind us, as we often have to do, when we have holidays that are intended to remind us of past situations, or if there is an anniversary that reminds us to remember something, people that made a sacrifice in the past, or something that was significant change in the history of mankind, whether it was in your country or whether it was for your religion or whatever it might be. I feel like we are at a stage, especially as we're seeing some variability happen, some turbulence happen around open source markets with licensing changes. We're seeing venture capital start to float around in different ways than it did before. We're seeing a lot of people question, how AI is going to work out in the future, and will there be an open source variation of that? Where's the data and things like that coming? I think it's worth sort of thinking about the freedoms, and freedoms may not necessarily be the way that you think about from a purely definitional sense. But, technology does afford us a lot of freedoms. Some of those freedoms may be, again, freedom of choice, freedom of ability to make, to use certain technologies, to disregard certain technologies and not be forced down a certain path, freedom to engage with people that have similar interests in technology spaces. But at the same time, while we call it things like lock-in and proprietariness or whatever it might be, there are certain freedoms that aren't necessarily inherently always going to be there from a technology perspective. And so, anyways, I think it's worth kind of thinking from time to time, and especially when we have a situation like we do, in which, kind of we do this annual thing, this remembrance of the United States of independence from a different country than when we were first founded. But, there's lots of examples of this around the world. You don't have to use the U.S. example of it. But I think it's worth thinking about, what freedoms do we appreciate from a technology perspective? What freedoms make you the most successful? Which ones potentially could go away that could have an impact on your career, your business, the way that you live your life? And, what would you do if some of those freedoms are taken away from you? Or if those, so-called freedoms are changed by somebody that's outside of your control? Right. What do you think you would do? What could you do? Are there other people that you can align with that have a similar interest in the types of freedoms that are interesting to you from a technology perspective? And how would you go about, continuing to allow those to be available to you in the ways that make the most sense for you? Whether that is, making sense to help you make money to live your life, make money to run a business, save you money, save you toil and time and effort. Whatever those things might be, I think it's always worthwhile. We have so many things kind of thrown at us all the time from a technology perspective that sometimes it can be overwhelming. But I think, as we see, certain things that happen from a politics perspective, but also just, movements in the marketplace or, trends happening in the industry, some large, some small. It's worth from time to time stopping and thinking and going, okay, where do we benefit from the freedoms that technology allows us, and where could that change? Not saying that they will change, but where could that change, and how would you respond to that? Right. So it's almost think of it as your own sort of disaster recovery plan or something like that. So, anyways, just something to think about. Not getting too deep into anything this week. We're getting into July, which I know for a lot of people is a time when they're taking vacation with their family and their kids. Maybe they're traveling. They're thinking maybe a little bit less about work because we're kind of in the middle of the year, kind of end of quarter for certain companies, and so we're just kind of thinking about some things at a bigger level than some of the more minutiae stuff that we often do with the show. So anyways, hopefully you are all doing well. Hopefully you are thankful for the freedoms that technology provides you. Hopefully you are thankful for the opportunities the technology industry provides you. And, and maybe just take a moment to sort of think about, what do those freedoms mean to you? What do those freedoms mean in the future? Where do you think they're going in the future? And, what are you doing sort of ensure that the things that you rely on, the things that you expect, are going to, continue to be there, whether they are exactly the same or they change in the future. Just, maybe worth taking a few minutes to think about those things. So anyways, with that, I'll wrap it up. Thank you all for listening. Another weekend perspective. Getting into July, as we mentioned, things are a little slow in terms of news, but we have a number of very, very interesting guests coming up this month. So hopefully, as you're taking some time off, spending some time with your family, you have a little bit of time to kill, whether it's driving or sitting at the beach or just, kind of relaxing. And hopefully we can fill that time for you with some interesting shows and guests coming up here in the next few weeks and so forth. So with that, I will wrap it up. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for telling a friend about the show. Thank you for helping us grow the podcast. And if we can ever help you with things, show@thecloudcast.net is our email address. You can always hit us up on social media or DMs or other ways that you want to reach out to us. So with that, we'll wrap it up. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.